Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to tonight's lecture, which is part of the Hyde lecture series hosted by the College of Architecture. I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's speaker, Laurel Broughton. Before I introduce Laurel, just a reminder that we'll have time for questions after the lecture, so please stick around for that as well. Laurel Broughton is the founder of Welcome, a design studio in Los Angeles revisiting the vernacular and telling stories through design. Their work engages with everyday objects in a variety of scales and purposes, from architectural developments to installations to handbag accessories. Through these projects, Welcome brings a sense of fun, suspense, and narrative into the spaces and objects we encounter and rely upon daily. Laurel received her Bachelor of Arts from New York University in Comparative Literature and Critical Theory, and her Master of Architecture from the Southern California Institute of Architecture. In 2017, she was the Howard A. Friedman Visiting Professor in the Practice of Architecture at University of California, Berkeley, College of Environmental Design. She has previously taught design studios, seminars, and workshops at Columbia University, University of Southern California, Art Center College of Design, University of Michigan, Tulane, and Syracuse, among others. Please join me in welcoming Laurel Broughton.
Okay, okay, so that's on. Just put this in my pocket here. Okay, Zach, thank you. And thank you to everyone here. I'm excited to be here in Lincoln. I've never been to Nebraska before, so now I get to check it off my, my state list. I was trying to do a mental count on the airplane during turbulence, but I didn't get that far, but I think it's around 30, so better than half, but and so I'm going to give a kind of, basically put pictures to Zach's introduction as a kind of brief introduction to a second chapter of this lecture. Should we turn the lights down maybe? Or is this, you can't? No? Okay. All right. So as Zach said, I have a studio in Los Angeles that's called Welcome. And I founded the studio in 2010. And as a lifelong collector of vintage objects and a lover of quirky buildings, which wasn't popular at the time, I wondered how new design could embody the characteristics that compelled me to old objects. So comedy, delight, the unexpected, the familiarly unfamiliar. And in all of our projects, we ask how we can introduce new ideas into built environments, interiors, and fashion through the repurposing of old ideas. So we're a studio that makes something new, or we like to think, something new out of something old. It's by reusing vernacular and familiar forms in unexpected ways. And often in the course of working on a project at one scale, we produce supporting work at other scales. And working at different scales with recognizable forms and types allows us to invite exploration and engagement in architecture and in design in potentially new ways. And one of the types of engagement that we're most invested in is storytelling. And in our work, we're interested in how objects and buildings tell stories when you can literally experience them in real life. And also how designers and architects in the course of presenting objects and buildings tell stories about those things and spaces that aren't there, and in what mediums they choose and through whose points of view. So one of the mediums that we've been thinking about in the studio lately are storybooks. And we began to think about how we might literally make a storybook of our own work. So what you're about to see is a quick test. Like, this is a literal first draft. When I originally started it, I thought I was gonna do a first draft and then do a better draft, and I didn't have time to do that. So this is a first draft of a new body of work, and that's primarily architectural work that was produced over the last 3 years. And it's, I'm gonna just move this down a little bit. And it's told in, at least for us, the new and experimental format of the storybook. So, A Peculiar Garden. Welcome to The Peculiar Garden. Chapter 1, Petticoat and Friends. Dearests, something different tonight. A coyote came over the back wall, leapt over it in a single bound, actually. I've not seen one in the garden before. And the first thing they did was nose that rusty bell. So I thought I'd call them Bell. So then the coyote came down the side of the old house and sat down on the path right next to Petticoat. And Petticoat, always lonely in the night and looking for something to care for, asked, "Are you hungry, baby?" And the coyote twitched its ears and sniffed the air. I think they weren't entirely sure of where the voice was coming from. And Petticoat rustled her scalloped skirt and said, "I am Petticoat. I am mother of this garden." And Belle stood up as if taken aback by either the voice or the rustling. And Belle loped down into the lower garden. Umbrella and tent stood still, so still I think they must have hoped to disappear. "A wild thing," Petticoat intoned more gently. "That sound is my skirt." And she shook it again, and the scallops made a rustling sound like leaves or shells or tin cans. "See my skirt here, it's white above the plants." Petticoat asked, rustling it once more. And if Belle had looked, they wouldn't have seen the scallops moving, only heard them. Instead, Belle poked their snout in and out of the flower beds and gazed around the garden, and Petticoat waited expectantly for a compliment. "You are rather like a dog. We have a dog here. He's sleeping upstairs," said Petticoat, ignoring being ignored. "Do you like kibble?" And Belle sniffed the lemon tree. "Well, if you do, the pantry door is open," she continued. And the door creaked on cue, and Belle promptly trotted around Petticoat's corner and up the narrow stairs and in the door. Through the window, I saw that Petticoat had turned on her light. "Didn't expect it, did you? I'm warm, almost fleshy on the inside, blue and orange and pink," said Petticoat. And pausing for a second, continued strangely, "You might not know this, but blood is blue before it meets the air." And seemingly at the mention of blood, the coyote leapt on the center orange countertop, barred its teeth. "Off!" shrieked Petticoat. "Manners, wild thing. I invited you here." And oddly obedient, Belle silently returned to the floor. "So maybe you are hungry. Push the bowl out where they can see it," Petticoat instructed. And at that, Table used a slippered foot to slide the bowl into view. Belle approached it sniffing. "I am Table," Table said in a monotone. And the coyote looked around and then ate from the bowl. "Did she tell you she is the mother?" asked Table as he prodded the floor with a foot. Tilting his broad top slightly, "She's more of a kitchen, really. I am a workhorse." "Tisk, I care for the babies. Without me, they would be lost," Petticoat said. The old house can barely remember to do just about anything for them. And Belle continued to eat, ignoring the conversation, and the kibble skittered around the floor. A kibble landed on Table's slipper, and he snorted and stamped, flicking it into the air and onto Petticoat's bench. And by instinct, Belle darted after it onto the bench. For a workhorse, Table, you are rather finicky, Petticoat admonished. But from the bench, with his two front paws on the ledge, Belle leaned out the open window and looked into the lower garden from above. And it was funny to see a coyote looking out Petticoat's window. And Belle shifted as if to jump. We wouldn't do that if we were you, came a chorus of squeaky voices and little thuds as all Petticoat's drawers and cabinet doors opened and closed slightly. Belle froze at the window. Knobs, exclaimed Petticoat. You should be seen and not heard. Only move when prompted. Her tone softening, and another round of thuds followed. Screwdriver, it is you who should be keeping them in line, not me, Petticoat scolded. A large yellow screwdriver was rakishly leaned against the far wall. Belle growled at a drawer that opened a wink next to them and snapped shut. We might be more wild than you, Coyote, Screwdriver chuckled, followed by more squeaks and thuds of his charges. I saw a light come on upstairs in the old house, and we all heard a little girl call out for her mama. My babies are waking. Off you go, Petticoat said to Belle. The screwdriver twirled, and Belle ran back out the pantry door. The coyote came back around Petticoat's corner into the lower garden and stopped. Umbrella and tent, who'd been eavesdropping, stood silently, and the light was beginning to peek through the olive trees. Belle started up the path toward the back wall. And well, you know what happened now. The blue door on the old porch rattled open, and Belle froze. Mama, there's something in the garden, a little voice cried out from behind the screen door. Carriage House made a lumbering sort of sound near the breezeway arch. I don't like to get involved in these things, but you might as well come this way, Coyote, he mumbled. And turning back toward the lower garden, Belle sprinted down the path to the arch. They paused before passing through the breezeway and into the front garden and right out onto the street, heading for the park. I heard Carriage House close and lock the yoke door behind them. And that was that. Love Moon. Chapter 2, Deirdre's Eyebrows. Dearest, windy night tonight, warm and dry. Belle came over the wall, and immediately they went head into the gusts, far, far out along the winding parkway to the base of the arroyo. I can't remember. Have you met Deirdre? Well, Belle did tonight. Drat this wind making a mess, Deirdre whined. The dust coats everything. Mess, mess, mess. And I have fresh paint, and it's going to get dulled up now. And Belle stood transfixed, a silhouette against the brightly lit atrium between two gray rectangles. Coyote, you are in my eye line. Tell me how my eyebrow looks. Is it dusty already? Still shiny? Deirdre demanded of Belle. Her eyebrow didn't seem dull to me. The strong green arch of the atrium roof and the lavender of her backlit curtains radiated into the night. In fact, she looked just as made up and ready as ever for evening visitors. And then a splash from behind. Drat, a palm frond in the pool now. I was hoping for more of a dancing night, she moaned. And Belle disappeared into the shadows as another gust came through. Look at the pool. It won't be till Thursday they are removed. And the leaves, this wind, Deirdre fretted. Belle paddled onto the pool deck and slipped inside a slightly open large slider on the pool house. Presumptuous, aren't you, Coyote? I didn't invite you in. and paused before adding, looking for some shelter from the storm? Well, you are back in my eye line. This is my second eyebrow. I like to have one eye to the street and a second on my back. You can't do that, can you? Deirdre asked. And Belle sniffed the built-in sofa and then ran their snout along the base of the curved tile wall. Oh, Coyote, that is forward. That's my neck. It's brand new, just constructed. Does it make me look young? But Belle had followed the curve into the bathroom and was lapping at the water from a drip in the blue shower. Silly animal, you're standing on my ear, and that tickles. Well, the neck makes me feel young. In fact, I've just had a bit of a facelift, and I'm really feeling myself. Another gust of wind, and something caught Belle's nose. Deirdre seemed to know what it was. Puppy, they left steak out for the two little dogs, even though they've been gone for 3 years now. Come, I can get a good look at you with my biggest eye. And Belle passed through one set of sliders, crossed the pool deck, and went in through another. I rattle in winds like this, all this glass. I keep these open a crack, so you can't feel my age. Never ask about age, animal. Followed by, you are young. Once spotted, Belle went directly for 2 pink bowls on the floor. A noisy eater you are, but you keep yourself clean. I don't smell anything doggy about you. And Deirdre made a loud sniffing sound. Come closer. Let me lick you, Deirdre coaxed. The ear and nose doors opened, revealing a pink tongue surrounded by mirrors. At that, Belle took off down the stairs in the atrium, perhaps looking for a way out. Fierce Coyote, you've ended up in my tummy now, and I just wanted a lick, Deirdre laughed. And Belle rubbed their side all the way along the pink velvet seating, seeming not to notice that Deirdre was implying that she'd eaten him. And then he nested on the purple swirling floor and fell asleep. And that was that. Love Moon. Chapter 3, Rick-Rack in the Fog. Dearests, low visibility tonight. The fog rolled in, and I could barely make out much of the peculiar garden at all. I had a brief glimpse of Belle curled up asleep under the olive tree, and then all blank again, and when I got a clearing a while later, Belle was all the way by the coast. They must have let the billowing and rolling carry them along. In fact, the next thing I saw, Belle trotted headfirst into Thimble Gate. Ouch! Excuse you, animal, Thimble Gate declared as Belle shuffled back. Where might you be going? Certainly not going to thread your way through here unannounced. And Belle just stared. I am protector of this yard. Who are you? Thimblegate continued. They call me Thimble, although I am flat and not round, and I have portals and not dimples, but I suppose in some way my role is the same. But I am a silvery gray. I mean a gray, a flat, silvery tone, not metallic, of course. And just then, Belle pawed Thimble. All right, animal, seems like you want in, but no eating in here. And Thimble swung a panel open, and through the fog, you could see only the bright burgundy trim of Rick-Rack floating in the distance, and the boat deck seeming to bob before them. Visitor, Thimblegate called into the foggy yard beyond him. On a clear night, a path ambling through the wild garden would have been visible, but instead, Belle leapt directly onto boat deck. Most of the time, I float slightly elevated to the plants. They are my sea. Tonight, though, I am moored only in fluffy white. I am boat deck. The fog thinned and Rick-Rack's trim came into view. "Where shall I take you, Coyote?" Boat Deck asked. And just then, as Rick-Rack interjected, "Boat Deck, don't scare the animal. We're all cozy here and friends. And besides, we all know you can't float anywhere. You just appear to." And Rick-Rack turned on her lights. "Animal, where do you live? Do you want to live here with me? The owners finished us and had to move out of town. I was to house their son, an artist. Come inside." Belle went in and stood in the big empty room. "I'm a good big space for painting, they tell me." "Come, I ran a warm bath. It's so damp tonight." And at the sound of running water, Belle trotted into the bathtub, and I heard them jump right in. And Rick-Rack giggled, "Ah, so you like water." And that was that. Love Moon. Chapter 4, Little Yellow. Dearest, it was raining all night. Poor Belle came over the wall, already drenched. They tried for some shelter under the olive tree, and finding it raining there too, then took off toward Little Yellow's glowing light on the ridge. Little Yellow was a very yellow beacon in an otherwise dark and rainy night, and Belle went straight to her. "I am not a beacon, Coyote. I saw you come up the hill. I am a drop of sunshine, a little sunshine in a cup. Seeing as you are all wet, do you need some sunshine? Can I offer you a dab?" Belle marched right inside when Little Yellow opened the door, and in the warm yellow, Belle shook off all the raindrops, and each drop seemed to instantly dissolve into the warm air. "Oh, Coyote, you can bask in me. I will dry you off. Such a pity for everyone else that the night comes and the rain and the weather blocking out our rays. Oh, don't think I am the whole sun. Again, I am just a splash, a sip of sun that got away." And from the window, I could see that Belle's fur was already dry. And Belle sniffed the air, and Little Yellow began to chime in. "Again, I am a tiny slice of sun. I burn bright, but I am very little." And Belle wandered into the loo. "Yes, a small bite of sunshine continues in there too," and Little Yellow trailed off. "Little Yellow, you aren't the only one here," came another voice from above. "I can't see down there, but if you're a bird, would you like to fly up here to me? I am tea for two." And Belle stood, not seeming to notice the questions. And Tea for Two persisted. "Come up here. I can make you a cup. Good for a rainy night. Up here, look up. I'm the misplaced table set with Grandma's china. Drat! I'm good to be gazed at, seen but not touched. I suppose that's what Grandmother wanted." "Tea, stop it. It's just a wet dog. It doesn't know a thing about tea. Would probably break a cup if they could even get up there," Little Yellow interjected. And just then, a clap of thunder, and Belle bolted out, and I lost sight of them in the rain. And that was that. Love Moon. Chapter 5, The Curators. Dearest, chilly tonight and damp from last night's rain. The black cats were milling about later than usual. They were bickering with each other and batting around a ball of string, taking them up and down the path and to the fountain and back again. I almost thought with all the commotion, Belle wouldn't appear. But sure enough, they came over the back wall, and a meet cute with the cats around the corner. Both parties ready to pounce, and then the cats offered Belle some string, and off they all went, yipping and mewing. I was surprised when I next saw that they had taken Belle home with them, but maybe they were cold. I could see through the window that Fireplace had expected them with a roaring fire. Well, the cats probably, not a visitor. "Boys, what's this you've dragged in?" Fireplace asked. And the cats immediately curled up on the hearth while Belle stood off to the side. "Wile E. Coyote, I know your type. No funny business in here," Fireplace continued. And Belle took a casual sniff of the large sofa and then, clearly directed towards the cats, "Tell me about your day. Any adventures?" "Wait, who's that with you?" another voice called. "Are they here to see the art?" the voice continued. And Belle must have sensed something more friendly and followed the voice into the kitchen. "I am White Box," she said. "And I am Black Box," said another voice from further away. "We are partners. The same, but different," they said. And Belle looked up at the walls to either side of them. "We are curators," the first voice continued. "Well, not curators exactly, but we hold and display the art. Our spaces were shaped for it," the other finished. "Typically, we are the messy spaces, but here we are curators," said one voice. "Again, we are not curators. We just make space for the art in places where it normally isn't," the other interrupted. "I am subdued and matte and refined, formal even for a main kitchen," the first continued. And Belle was sniffing around the floor as if looking for something. "Well, back here, I am shiny and clean. A laundry, a butler's pantry, a task desk. I am high gloss." And coming into the other space, Belle made a beeline for the cat food dishes. "Oh, you would go right for those, specially nooked so as to not be visible for the people. Oh, get out of here. Can't we just stay on topic?" And I caught a glimpse of Belle looking at their own reflection in the floor. They seemed startled, and sensing it, Black Box opened the side door and Belle bolted out. "Wait, we haven't even shown you the work yet," White Box called after them. And that was that. Love, Moon. Chapter 6, The Bread Box. "Dearests, the heat wave has everyone acting batty and Belle too. I found them in front of Carriage House, playing at the foot of the yoke door with a wadded up newspaper in their mouth, tossing it and catching it and tossing it and catching it. And then tossing it and pawing it to the ground, spreading it out and crumpling it up back again. Funny business, this being a coyote is." "Ouch! No respect for paper architecture," the picture on the newspaper called out. "I am Bread Box. I am commissioned by the city of Los Angeles. I bet the rest of these buildings around here can't say that," they continued. "I am part of the city's standard plan ADU program." Ouch! As Belle started to rip the newspaper apart. "Oh, Coyote, I suppose you're right to not like me, as I can be easily built all over the city, mostly in places where you would want to be." And that was that. Belle dropped the shredded newspaper and headed off toward the park. Love, Moon. To be continued. And now the credits. So Petticoat, played by Petticoat at the 1939 compound, located in Los Angeles, and status completed in 2023. The Carriage House, played by Carriage House, also at the 1939 compound, location Los Angeles, status completed in 2023. The slipper table, played by slipper table in Los Angeles, status completed in 2023. The flathead knobs, played by the flathead knobs and screwdriver, also at the 1939 compound, located in Los Angeles and available for custom orders. Status completed in 2023. Deirdre, played by the Eyebrow House, location Pasadena, California. Status permitted with construction supposed to start in the spring of 2025. Rick Rack Cottage, played by the Rick Rack Cottage in Venice, California. Status completed in 2023. At Little Yellow, played by Little Yellow, location Los Angeles, and status construction also supposed to start spring of 2025. The Curators, played by the Collector's Renovation, location Los Angeles, status completed in 2024. And finally, the Bread Box, played by the Bread Box, City of Los Angeles Standard Plan ADU program, location Los Angeles, status permitted and available since 2021. And Belle, played by Coyote, location Los Angeles, status wild. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel. We've got time for a few questions.
If there are any.
So is this?
Oh, Mason, hold on.
Is this book presentation something you would give to potential clients, or is this?
Probably not. I feel like the clients of these projects would maybe be a little bit, I don't know, not offended is the right word, but when you do projects, you're working for a client and you're sort of giving them their, if it's a house, you're giving them their home, and I sort of took the project back a little bit in order to make the story.
So one thing I didn't introduce at the beginning is the theme of the lecture series, which is trajectories, which is all around kind of questioning what the pathways might be from a degree in one of the design disciplines, like architecture, into practice. And I think your work has always challenged what the expectations of conventional practice might seem like as a student in an architecture program, looking at what the professional career is going to be. Can you talk a little bit about how you viewed that maybe as a Master's of Architecture student at SciArc, and then producing your own work and carving out a space for yourself in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I mean, I think something that is kind of like true of my background, which is that I didn't study architecture as an undergrad. It's something that I came to after studying comparative literature, and that has kind of informed all my work. I mean, I'm interested in stories, and I'm interested also in, I suppose the like semiotics of design. So literally how the stuff that's around us tells stories and gives meaning to our environments. This was not something that was popular, like when I was a student in architecture. And yeah, but something that was, I went to SCI-Arc at a time, I mean, SCI-Arc has had many transitions, but at the time that I was a student, there was a kind of transition between a kind of old guard SCI-Arc, which was one of making physical things in the world, and the incoming kind of beginnings of all of the digital technologies that we now you guys use every day and kind of take for granted. And at the time that I was a student, there was a kind of clash between the professors who had been teaching in, the sort of making of architecture through the making of physical models and using materials and that, and then a younger guard of professors coming in who were interested in kind of what can the digital, these softwares. At the time that I was in school, it was Maya. I don't think anyone even talks about it anymore, but it was like a big deal. And so I have always been interested in how we make real things in the world. And I have an interest in using technology, but in the service of the things that I am interested in. So, there's a kind of, I suppose there's a wolf in sheep's clothing in a way with my work, which is that everything is made using contemporary technologies, but I kind of cloak it in something that I like it to feel more handmade. I don't know if does that answer the question? Oh, and then carving out space for myself. I would say I had a true to my, I don't know, am I part of a generation? Part of my age group I started teaching, and I started teaching because in 2008 I was working after I had graduated from grad school at an architecture firm, and in 2008 basically the entire economy collapsed, but also particularly architecture and construction, and I found myself unemployed, like basically all of my friends, and the only job in architecture I could get was a teaching job. And I had always been sort of like interested in this idea of teaching, but I was kind of more interested in actually making things. And then I sort of ended up on a teaching path. I taught for 12 years. But through teaching, I found a kind of space for me to introduce kind of and think about what other ways and things that architecture could be besides just building.
Yeah, I have two questions. Like the first one about like the storytellings. Do you normally, because like your background is from like literatures, do you start like viewing architectures, like study it from like making the stories? Like for example, the one that you shows like the story in the kitchen, and you start to think of architecture from that story, or you start from like architecture first and coming back up, make up presentations that can tell the architectures.
I think it goes both ways. I think just like any studio project that you're doing, there's a retro engineering when you need to kind of present it, and I think it would be false to claim that I have like written a story and then the building perfectly fulfills the story. I mean, beyond storytelling, I have a set of things that I'm interested regarding like types of forms and materials and spaces that don't necessarily like dovetail perfectly with this presentation per se. There could be an entirely different presentation where I could talk about them in the projects in an entirely different way, which is something I think is important to architecture, right? That there are multiple ways of talking about things, and there's also multiple audiences for it. There's the audience of talking about architecture to architects, and then there's talking about architecture to everybody else. There's talking about it to your mom, to your kid, to your,
Yeah, and another question is like how do you convince your client to make the house that look like that? For example, like the bread box house. Like, do you find the clients that kind of like fit perfectly with your taste, or do you just like propose them so many schemes that they like one of the scheme that you like?
Yeah, well, the bread box is an interesting one for you to bring up, because the bread box was essentially the city of Los Angeles invited they were instituting something that they call the standard plan program, which means that they wanted to have pre-approved permitted plans for ADUs, which are like, I don't know if you guys have those here, accessory dwelling units. Basically, a way for people to build in the backyard of a legal way to build like a small secondary house in the backyard of a single family home, or to like transform an existing garage or a shed or something into like a small housing unit. Because I don't know if you guys have this problem here in Lincoln, like there's a housing shortage in Los Angeles. So they're always trying to kind of find ways to add housing to a city that is mostly just like single family houses. Anyway, that one, I was invited as part of a small group of architects, and we were basically given, because it was in some ways more of a marketing scheme for the city, we were given kind of like carte blanche to design a ADU that could go into a backyard. But with other projects, I think, people come to you because they see work that you've already done, but there's different kind of scales with, say, like the eyebrow house. The client, I originally had kind of encountered that client through my handbag line, because she had a store. And then she had ended up purchasing this house, and I had started doing more kind of like traditionally architectural work, and somehow she had kind of come across my work and contacted me. And so that project, because she was, we had a sort of existing conversation about the kind of handbag line and forms, and she was a fan of that, allowed us to take what was the eyebrow house, which was built in 1962 by a mid-century architect named John Pugsley. And it's an interesting house because it has this very like notable feature of this eyebrow on the atrium, hence its name. But over the course of the last, 60 years, it had some unfortunate renovations. So it had basically been like wiped clean of any other kind of historicness about it. And that, for the client and I, we were like, that's kind of great, because that means we don't have the burden of trying to restore a mid-century house back to like its former glory. We have this one weird characteristic, and it's known like locally all over town as the eyebrow house, and that can become the kind of narrative driver of thinking about like the house as a kind of body, and all of the different parts of the house that we were adding we began to think of as kind of abstractions of body parts. So the pool house, which will be a fully ground up, it's actually an ADU, a ground up building. It has a neck in it, and then we began to think of like, well, where if it has one eyebrow, it needs a second eyebrow, it needs eyes, it needs ears and nose, and so all of the kind of parts that we were inserting into the house, then that kind of became its story, right?
Are there any final questions? Yeah, sure.
Thanks for the presentation. It was really great. My question is about the...
Weird.
It was great. The layeredness of the presentation, though, made me think about the name of your firm. And I wonder if you could unpack the name a little bit for everyone.
Yeah, the name actually came from when I was in grad school and I was doing my thesis project. And something that, because the culture of the school at the time was very fractious between this kind of old guard and new guard, I was very interested with my thesis project about an idea of kind of like inclusivity and welcoming. And so it just, I think it didn't end up being actually like the name of my thesis project or anything, but at some point early in the, you do like, when you're, I don't know if you guys do thesis here, but we had a semester of research and then a semester of doing a thesis project. And the semester of research, you're really doing like 50 projects as you're trying to figure out what it is that you're doing. And there was some early version of some project that was called Welcome, and that's where it came from. But I think it came to just kind of embody this idea of within the discipline of architecture, there's a kind of closed, almost black box element, and I've always been interested in it both being something that is inclusive, i.e. that outsiders can come in, but also that I could use my work as a way to bring outside things into architecture also.
Thank you, Laura, for a wonderful lecture. Please join me in thanking Laurel one more time.